Amanda Whitmore had everything a woman could ask for, or at least, that's how it appeared from the outside. Living in a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood in Toronto, she was the picture of a devoted wife and loving mother. Her husband, Daniel Whitmore, was a hard-working project manager at Lawson & Company, one of Canada's most prestigious construction firms. He was respected by his colleagues, loved by his friends, and completely devoted to Amanda and their 6-year-old son, Ethan. Their home, a beautiful 2-story house with a manicured lawn and a backyard that hosted summer barbecues, was a symbol of Daniel's dedication. Every morning, he kissed Amanda on the forehead before heading to work, whispering, "One day, I'll give you the world." But for Amanda, that promise wasn't enough. She had once dreamed of a life far grander than the one she was living. Before becoming a full-time wife and mother, she had worked in marketing, where she rubbed shoulders with executives, influencers, and the kind of people who never worried about money. She had seen what real wealth looked like: the designer clothes, the extravagant vacations, the luxury cars. She had tasted it, and she wanted more. Yet here she was, stuck in a routine life, grocery shopping, PDA meetings, and listening to Daniel talk about construction projects over dinner. The love she once felt for him had faded into something closer to resentment. She admired his work ethic, but she despised their modest lifestyle. The real problem, she thought, wasn't Daniel himself. It was his lack of ambition. She had seen how the truly powerful men operated, men like Richard Lawson, Daniel's boss. Richard was a man who didn't settle. He didn't accept limitations. He took what he wanted whenever he wanted. He was the kind of man Amanda wished Daniel could be. And soon, fate would put her on a path where her desires would take precedence over loyalty, love, and morality. She just didn't know it yet. Amanda first saw Richard Lawson at a company gala hosted at an exclusive 5-star hotel in downtown Toronto. She had heard his name countless times. Daniel often spoke about him with admiration, sometimes frustration. Richard was the CEO of Lawson & Company, a man who had built an empire with ruthless efficiency. Seeing him in person was something else entirely. Richard was in his late 40s, with salt and pepper hair, a chiseled jawline, and the confidence of a man who owned every room he walked into. He was surrounded by top executives, industry leaders, and socialites who clung to his every word. Dressed in a tailored Armani suit, he exuded wealth, power, and dominance, the very things Amanda craved. Daniel introduced her to Richard with the casual nervousness of an employee speaking to his superior. "Richard, this is my wife, Amanda." Richard's piercing blue eyes scanned her, and for a moment, Amanda felt exposed. Then he smiled, extending a firm hand. "So you're the woman behind the man. Daniel never stops talking about you." Amanda felt a rush. She wasn't sure if it was flattery or something more. As the night went on, Amanda observed how people treated Richard, with admiration, fear, and unwavering respect. He was the kind of man who commanded the world, while Daniel was the kind who worked for men like him. When Richard spoke to her again, it wasn't just polite conversation. It was an invitation, an unspoken challenge. "You have an eye for luxury," he said, noticing her gaze lingering on his expensive Rolex. "A woman like you deserves the finer things in life." Amanda's pulse quickened. It was as if he had reached into her mind and pulled out her deepest thoughts. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt with Daniel: excitement. That night, as she lay in bed beside her husband, she couldn't stop thinking about Richard. The way he looked at her, the way his words lingered, the way he made her feel seen. And she knew this was only the beginning. Amanda tried to shake the feeling Richard Lawson had stirred inside her, but it was impossible. The way he had looked at her, the way he spoke with an air of dominance, it awakened something deep inside her, something that had been buried beneath years of routine domestic life. Her mind raced in the days following the gala. She found herself scrolling through news articles about him, admiring his success, his influence. Every mention of his name made her heart beat faster. Then the first message came. It was a simple text from an unknown number. "You looked stunning the other night. We should talk." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. She knew who it was. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She knew she should delete the message. She knew she should ignore it. But temptation was stronger than reason. "Talk about what?" she finally replied. "Meet me for coffee. No pressure." She told herself it was harmless. Just coffee. A casual meeting. But deep down, she knew better. They met at an upscale cafe downtown, the kind of place where business deals were made over imported espresso. Amanda had dressed carefully, nothing too obvious, but enough to make a statement. A fitted black dress, subtle heels, and just the right amount of makeup. Richard was already waiting when she arrived, sipping his coffee like he had all the time in the world. "You came?" he said smoothly, a smirk playing at his lips. "Curiosity got the best of me," Amanda admitted, sliding into the seat across from him. What started as small talk quickly turned into something deeper. Richard didn't ask about Daniel. He didn't ask about her home life. He focused on her, what she wanted, what she dreamed of. "You're too smart to waste your life playing house," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "A woman like you belongs in the kind of world where power and money aren't just dreams. They're reality." Amanda felt her pulse quicken. No man had ever spoken to her like this. Not Daniel. Not anyone. She should have walked away. She should have told him that she loved her husband, that she wasn't interested. But instead, she leaned in and asked, "And what world is that?" Richard reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing hers. "One where you don't have to ask permission to have what you want." It was an invitation, a test, and Amanda failed it spectacularly. Their meetings became more frequent. It started with secret lunches, then late-night drinks, then excuses to be out of the house. Amanda found herself craving the thrill of Richard's presence. The way he made her feel powerful, desired, important. Then, one evening, everything changed. Richard had invited her to a penthouse suite, under the guise of discussing a charity event he was organizing. Amanda knew what it really meant. She could have said no. She could have stopped herself before stepping into that elevator. But she didn't. The moment she walked into the suite, Richard was waiting. The city skyline glowed behind him, casting a golden hue over the room. He closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "You know you want this," he murmured. And for the first time in years, Amanda let go of everything else. Their affair was reckless, passionate, and intoxicating. Richard was everything Daniel wasn't. Bold, assertive, powerful. He made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. But with every stolen moment, every whispered promise, Amanda was stepping deeper into dangerous territory. Because affairs like these didn't stay secret forever. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just ruin lives, it would end one. At first, Daniel Whitmore didn't think much of Amanda's changes. He had always known his wife was restless, that she longed for something bigger than their quiet suburban life. When she started going out more often, meeting old friends, attending charity events, or staying out late on work projects, he chalked it up to her wanting more social freedom. But soon, the changes became too obvious to ignore. Amanda, who once complained about money, suddenly had designer handbags and expensive jewelry. She stopped asking Daniel about their finances. The perfume she wore smelled different, stronger, more seductive. And then there were the unexplained absences, the rushed showers when she got home, the way she avoided his touch at night. Something was wrong. One evening, Daniel came home earlier than expected. Amanda wasn't there. Ethan was in his room, playing on his tablet, unaware of anything unusual. Daniel checked his phone, no texts, no calls from Amanda. He opened their closet and noticed a dress missing, one she had never worn around him before. His stomach twisted. He tried to ignore the nagging voice in his head. Amanda had always been independent. Maybe she really was just out with friends. But then, as he was about to pour himself a drink, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Daniel wasn't the kind of man to invade his wife's privacy. But something compelled him to look. The message on the screen made his blood run cold. Last night was unforgettable. I need to see you again. The sender? Richard Lawson. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. His mind raced, replaying every odd behavior, every late-night excuse, every cold response Amanda had given him in recent weeks. The pieces fell into place. His wife was having an affair, and not just with anyone, with his boss. A wave of rage, betrayal, and heartbreak crashed over him. His entire world, the life he had built with Amanda, was unraveling before his eyes. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw the phone across the room. But he forced himself to stay calm. If Amanda was betraying him, he needed proof. So he did something he never thought he'd do. He decided to follow her. Daniel Whitmore had never considered himself a jealous or controlling husband. He trusted Amanda, at least he used to. But after seeing that message from Richard Lawson, something inside him shifted. The weight of betrayal pressed down on him like a steel beam, and no matter how much he tried to push it away, it refused to leave. He needed answers. He needed to see it for himself. And once he did, he knew exactly what he would do next. Daniel began paying closer attention to Amanda's schedule. She had always been predictable, but now her patterns had changed. She left the house dressed better than usual, her makeup carefully done, her hair styled to perfection. She used to text him throughout the day. Simple things like reminding him to pick up groceries or asking how work was going. But now she barely checked in. She claimed she was catching up with friends or helping with a fundraiser. But Daniel noticed something odd. She never mentioned names. One night, when Amanda was in the shower, he did something he never thought he would do. He went through her purse. Inside, he found receipts from expensive restaurants he had never been to. A hotel key card from a 5-star suite downtown. A diamond bracelet he knew he didn't buy her. His worst fears were confirmed. Amanda wasn't just having an affair. She was living it. But he needed to catch her in the act. He needed undeniable proof before he confronted her. The next evening, Amanda kissed Ethan goodnight and told Daniel she was meeting her friend Claire for dinner. Daniel smiled, pretending to believe her. But as soon as she left, he grabbed his keys and followed her. He stayed a few cars behind, his grip tightening on the steering wheel as he watched her drive toward downtown Toronto. His heart pounded, a mixture of rage and devastation swirling inside him. Amanda didn't go to a restaurant. She pulled into the underground parking lot of an upscale hotel. Daniel parked outside and waited. A few minutes later, Richard Lawson arrived in his sleek black Mercedes. He stepped out, dressed in a sharp tailored suit, and walked inside without hesitation. Daniel clenched his jaw. There was no more doubt. No more hoping that he was wrong. His wife was sleeping with his boss. And in that moment, Daniel made a decision. If Amanda wanted money and power so badly, she would see just how dangerous real power could be. He wasn't going to let this go. He was going to make them pay. Daniel Whitmore had always considered himself a rational man. He wasn't prone to fits of rage, nor was he the kind of husband who sought revenge over petty grievances. But this wasn't just a betrayal. It was humiliation. His wife, the woman he had loved and built a life with, had thrown everything away. For money, power, and the touch of his boss. As he sat outside the hotel in his car, watching the building where Amanda and Richard Lawson were undoubtedly together, something inside him snapped. This wasn't going to end with an argument. It was going to end in blood. Daniel waited for over an hour, his mind spiraling into darkness. He imagined them together in that penthouse suite. Amanda laughing, Richard touching her, whispering things to her that she used to say to him. By the time Amanda and Richard finally emerged from the hotel, Daniel had made up his mind. He followed them at a distance as they drove separately, Richard heading toward his luxurious estate, Amanda taking a different route home. She had no idea her husband was behind her. No idea that she had pushed him too far. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He didn't even feel his foot pressing harder on the gas pedal. Amanda pulled into their driveway and stepped out of the car, adjusting her coat like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just spent hours betraying him. As she unlocked the front door, Daniel slammed his car into park and stepped out. "Amanda!" She froze, her entire body stiffening before she turned around. "Daniel," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "I thought you were asleep." He took a slow step toward her. "Long night." Amanda swallowed. "Yeah, Claire and I." "Don't." His voice was low, dangerous. Amanda's breath hitched. She could see it in his eyes, the pure, unfiltered rage simmering beneath the surface. And then she saw something else. A knife. A long, gleaming kitchen knife gripped in Daniel's hand. "Daniel!" She took a shaky step backward. "You're scaring me." "You should be scared," he muttered, his voice eerily calm. Amanda turned to run, but Daniel was faster. The first stab hit her in the back, just below her shoulder blade. She let out a scream, stumbling forward onto the porch, her hands scrambling to push open the door. Blood poured from the wound, soaking through her coat. She barely made it inside before Daniel grabbed her by the hair and yanked her backward, sending her crashing to the floor. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" He seethed, towering over her. "Did you think I'd just sit there while you humiliated me?" Amanda gasped for breath, her vision blurring from the pain. "Please, Daniel, don't." He didn't listen. The next stab plunged into her stomach. Then another, and another. The sound of the blade tearing through flesh filled the room, mixing with Amanda's ragged screams. Blood sprayed across the white walls, pooling beneath her trembling body. Her breaths became shallow. Her hands, slick with her own blood, weakly tried to push him away. But Daniel was relentless. By the time he stopped, Amanda was barely alive, her eyes wide, lips moving, but no words coming out. Daniel stepped back, panting. His shirt was drenched in blood. His hands trembled as he looked at what he had done. His wife, the woman he had once loved, was dying beneath him. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Daniel staggered back to his car, his mind racing. Amanda's blood stained his hands, his clothes, even his face. But he wasn't finished. Richard Lawson had to pay too. The drive to Richard's estate was a blur. His hands shook on the steering wheel, but his purpose remained clear. When he arrived, the massive mansion stood dark and quiet. Richard was probably inside, sleeping soundly, completely unaware that his world was about to shatter. Daniel stepped out of the car, gripping the knife tighter. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And before the night was over, Daniel was going to make sure Richard Lawson never touched another man's wife again. The quiet neighborhood of Oak Ridge had never seen such horror. It was just after 3 a.m. when the first call came in. A panicked neighbor reporting screams, followed by silence. By the time law enforcement arrived at the Whitmore residence, the front door was slightly ajar, a chilling invitation into the carnage inside. The officers pushed inside cautiously, and within seconds, their radios crackled with urgent requests for backup and medical assistance. Amanda Whitmore's body lay in the foyer, surrounded by a dark pool of blood that had already begun to dry. Her eyes were frozen open, a look of sheer terror etched onto her lifeless face. The white walls of the house were streaked with red, and the smell of iron lingered heavily in the air. But there was no sign of Daniel. While forensic teams worked the scene at the Whitmore home, another call came in, this time from an elite gated community across town. A security guard at the Lawson estate had spotted a car parked outside for an unusual amount of time. When he approached, he found the driver's side door open. Inside, blood was smeared across the steering wheel. A trail of bloody footprints led from the vehicle to the mansion's front entrance. Fearing the worst, the guard called the police. When officers arrived and forced their way inside, they found Richard Lawson in his bedroom. Stabbed over a dozen times, his lifeless body sprawled across silk sheets. The blood-soaked knife was still embedded in his chest, its hilt gripped tightly in Daniel Whitmore's lifeless hand. He had collapsed beside Richard, his own throat slashed. A murder-suicide. Detectives quickly connected the two crime scenes. A clear but tragic narrative emerged. A husband consumed by jealousy and rage, a wealthy executive entangled in a deadly affair, and a wife who had unknowingly set the stage for her own brutal demise. The evidence left little room for doubt. Amanda's phone records revealed months of secret communication between her and Richard. Hotel receipts confirmed their illicit meetings. Security footage showed Daniel arriving at the hotel the night of the murders, watching from his car. Forensic analysis proved that Amanda had been stabbed first, followed by Richard. The press had a field day. Headlines painted Daniel as a man who had lost everything to betrayal, snapping in a fit of uncontrollable rage. Others saw him as a calculated killer who had planned his revenge with cold precision. In the end, it didn't matter. 3 lives were lost. A child was left orphaned. And the pursuit of money and power had ended in the most brutal way possible, in blood. The murders of Amanda Whitmore and Richard Lawson, followed by Daniel Whitmore's suicide, sent shockwaves through Toronto's upper-class circles. What had once seemed like a picture-perfect marriage had unraveled into a violent tragedy that left a young boy without parents and 2 powerful families disgraced. The media latched onto the story, branding it the Executive Affair Murders. News outlets dissected every detail: Amanda's ambition, Richard's predatory behavior, and Daniel's descent into homicidal rage. Talk shows debated who was truly to blame. Some painted Daniel as a victim of infidelity and corporate power plays, while others condemned him as a cold-blooded murderer who let his jealousy consume him. But for those closest to the case, the media circus meant nothing. The real consequences of that bloody night extended far beyond the headlines. At just 8 years old, Ethan Whitmore's life was shattered. One night, he had gone to bed with a mother who tucked him in and a father who kissed his forehead. The next morning, he woke up to police officers telling him that neither of them would ever come home again. Ethan was placed in the custody of his maternal grandparents, Margaret and Harold Thompson. They had always been close to Amanda, but they never imagined they would have to raise her son under such devastating circumstances. Margaret refused to believe that her daughter was to blame for what happened. In her eyes, Amanda had been manipulated by a powerful man, caught in a situation she couldn't escape. She was a good person, Margaret told reporters through tears. She made mistakes, but she didn't deserve to die like that. But on the other side of the tragedy, Daniel's parents saw things differently. The Whitmore family was devastated, not just by Daniel's death, but by the way he had been portrayed. They didn't see a murderer. They saw a man who had been betrayed and broken. He was pushed to the edge, Daniel's father, Robert, insisted. People act like he was a monster, but he wasn't. He loved Amanda. He loved his son. He just couldn't handle what they did to him. The tension between the two families grew unbearable. They fought over Ethan's future, each side convinced they knew what was best. The Thompsons wanted to raise him away from the shadow of his father's crimes. The Whitmores wanted to make sure Ethan never forgot where he came from. In the end, the courts granted full custody to Margaret and Harold, but the bitterness between the families never faded.